Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful January the 8th, 2020, Grando Deportes. Big C, how's it going for you good old boys down south?
Charlton, everything is exciting down here in the South, although I'm a little, as they would say, ticked off because Jerry Jones didn't invite me over to that pajama party they was having with Mike McCarthy to get a job. Maybe I'd have been hired as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys if Jerry Jones didn't have a phobia.
Yeah, I think the only African-American he had, guess who's coming to dinner, was Michael Jackson, Big C. You have to pass the paperback test if you want to be in Jerry Jones' house. I want to say it's all fair, love, and war. Big C Sports, sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. Big C Sports, powered by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, also Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. I was telling you, really, before we get into the National Suicide Hotline, the thing about Jerry Jones, how often do you invite somebody over to your house unless you really know them, and especially to spend the night, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, you know, the big cry in all the media today, Charlton, is why isn't African-American getting head coaching jobs in the NFL?
Yeah.
You know who's asking that question?
Who?
White media, Charlton.
Yeah.
They're constantly asking, why isn't African-American coaches getting an opportunity to be head coaches in the NFL? The players, 70% of the league is African-American.
Yeah.
There are a minimal amount of coordinators when you look at African-American, 10 defensive and 4 offensive.
Yeah.
So they're saying that the retired African-American cannot communicate with the current African-American players in the league, that you need an old, retread white guy to communicate with the African-Americans who make the NFL successful as it is. It's not the coaches, as people want to say.
Yeah.
They don't go out there and take snaps. They don't go out there and make tackles. But as we saw in the interview process in Dallas, they interviewed 2 coaches. You interviewed Marvin Lewis, brought him in for a cup of coffee during the day.
Yeah.
You bring in Mike McCarthy, you brought in for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and a sleepover at your house.
Yeah.
So there was no way that Marvin Lewis was ever going to get the job when Mike McCarthy was walking around in your house in pajamas, Jerry Jones' house. He had the job. He was like being one of his sons when you think about it.
Yeah.
Then you go to Carolina.
Yeah.
The new owner of the Carolina Panthers brings in Matt Rule. Matt Rule had a cup of coffee in the NFL as an offensive line coach with the New York Giants under Tom Coughlin.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
Then he goes to Temple, wins a couple games.
Yep.
He goes to Baylor, wins a couple of more games, Charlton. Then he gets an almost $70 million deal.
Yeah.
And you interview no lack of assistants around the NFL. Granted, there are 4 African-American offensive coordinators in the NFL, 10 African-American defensive coordinators in the NFL. Neither of these guys got a job. And the owner said, the reason why I hired Matt Rule, because he dressed like me and he looked sloppy like me.
Wow.
That's the reason he hired the guy. You could go out and get a sloppy-looking black guy off the street if you want. You could get an old-time player to when they were sagging.
Yeah.
You could get that. But the owner specifically said, I wanted to hire a guy who looked like me, which you and I have talked about extensively on our show, Charlton.
Yeah.
It's not a paper bag test. It's just black and white. I mean, you don't have to put any acronyms with this as you want.
Yeah.
They talk about the Rooney Rule in the NFL. It might as well throw that out and just say this is the racist rule. We're not going to hire black head coaches in the NFL.
Yeah, it's all part. It's all fair and love and war. And I think as an African American man, we see that so many times. I want to make sure we give out this National Suicide Hotline, and then I want to go back and ask you a few more questions. It's 800-273-8255, 800-273-8255, or you can text 838 838-255. That's 838-255 and get some help. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, to serve our military veterans in this country is the greatest service that a private citizen can do every day, because we have this autonomy of freedom because of our members of the military, Charlton.
Yeah.
And when you think about when these people come back home from serving in active duty, the stripes that they go through in this country, not having the support base that they do. We give out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, but that's for veterans who have a phone.
Yeah.
Think about how many homeless veterans there are on the streets of America, and no one gives any kind of thought or gratitude to them, Charlton. Say, well, they wouldn't be homeless if they did better for themselves.
Right.
That's not the case.
Right.
Many of these veterans have come back wounded, mentally and physically, Charlton, from battle scars in war. And yet our national government turns their back on them.
Yeah.
The National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, is a great segue for people to be able to reach out and touch and talk to somebody who can show them care and concern, Charlton, to give them that shoulder to lean on.
Yeah.
But many of our veterans don't have cell phones. We take cell phones for granted in this country. Most people have gotten rid of their landline phone.
Yeah.
These veterans can't go to a payphone booth and pick up and call an 800 number because they don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
We have to find a way as a nation to get phones in the hands of our veterans. This is something that the military should do for free. Give out every veteran a cell phone. As you want to give them benefits,
Yeah.
make a cell phone one of the benefits so that they can call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, hopefully to stem that horrific disease of suicide in this country. And as we have potential escalating conflict going on in the Middle East now, because we have a president who is careless, who does not think about his actions until afterwards and somebody tells him what he did wrong.
Yeah.
Think about the veterans the active duty military he may be putting in harm's way in the near future that will become discharged veterans soon. So the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, we have to find a way to get people in touch with it.
Yeah. You know, you just gave out a great statement. It's 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. It reminds me, the late Richard Pryor said that Warner Brothers loved him so much they gave him a horse instead of money, Big C, because that's how much they really didn't appreciate. They loved his making the people laugh, but when it came to giving him the check, they always had they had amnesia. But I think what's going to happen, and just the thought, it popped in my mind, so I know it's going to happen. You're going to hear on these debates coming up, these presidential elections, they're going to start saying what you just said. And it just makes so much sense. It's like, why has it not happened? I think every veteran, of course, give them a handshake and a pat on the back and give them a couple of stripes on their beautiful uniforms. But if we give every veteran a cell phone that's free, I know they have free cell phones out there, Big C, then people wouldn't have to worry about how to get help. And you're going to hear these candidates talking about that as they start stomping again about why they should be the president. When they bring up military, they're going to start offering that number and cell phones. You mark my words, Big C, your thoughts.
Well, Charlton, I hope that they do. I hope that we can be a segue of insight to our political parties, that these are the things that need to be accomplished. Don't keep up talking about how you're going to make this country great, how you're going to turn this and that around. Talk about how you're going to help the people that are destitute. You can help out any corporation in America, because they all are making hundreds of millions of dollars. But when we got people who don't make hundreds of dollars in a month, Charlton, those are the people that our politicians really need to concentrate on. You know, we went through a segment in this country in the 80s when they were talking about the left out, when Jesse Jackson was running for president.
Yeah.
We still have that particular part of America of the left out, people that have been forgotten about. And our military veterans are a huge part of that segment, Charlton.
Yeah, you know, I was just thinking about what you were saying, and it's so powerful that just give people a cell phone. We give them, they say give them a stipend for food or whatever, but the cell phone, it helps people know that they can reach out and get some help, especially when they finish fighting for this country. I want to go on to something that, because I listened to sports ever since I was probably around 6 years old, because there was always something on the news. Mostly the San Francisco Giants were being played in my house, or the Oakland A's. There was always a Giants or an A's game on. And then the Raiders were always on. 49ers not as much, but they were on too when I was growing up. But this thing about, as a young black boy, there's a book that everyone should read. It's by John Howard Griffith. It's called Black Like Me. Maybe every NFL owner should read it. Because, you know, racism is, you're not born with it. It's actually a learned behavior. Just like we're not born sexist. That's also a learned behavior. And I would wonder if, because I do believe in the heart of everybody that reads, they know that all life began on the African continent. If they Google Dr. Mendel and Gregory Leakey, they know that the dark gene is dominant, the light gene is recessive. So it all comes from the same. And you can get the recessive gene from the dominant, but you cannot get the dominant from the recessive. That's Mendel and Leakey, Big C. If we know the origins of all people, then racism becomes secondary. I want to get your thoughts on this. How do we tell young black boys, when we know that racism exists, to keep trying hard anyway, and that if you work hard enough, you're going to make it? We know that's true, but as we grow up, we realize that's not really the case, Big C, in every industry, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I take offense to that part when you said we're not all born sexy. I think I was born sexy when we think about it, Charles.
That's semantics.
But as we look at, having opportunity in life, and I know that's something that I've heard since I was a kid, is that opportunity exists for everybody. Opportunity does not exist for everybody.
Yeah.
Especially as we looked at the coaching profession in college and professional football.
Yeah.
That has been a white man social club. It's like Augusta. They don't have no blacks in Augusta at the golf course down there. It's memberships.
Yeah.
It's segregated, just as ownership is in professional sports. They outprice teams, so most minorities can't get into it.
Yeah.
They want individual ownership. They say you can't pool your money and get into this good old boys club.
Yeah.
You have to be a white billionaire to get into it, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, or Major League Baseball, even hockey. Not three black people watch hockey throughout the year, so I guess it really doesn't count that much.
Right.
But as we look at the major sports in America, the NFL and the NBA, we don't have minority participation in those sports, Charlton. As we look at it, when we think about it, and you bring it up so eloquently, that 70% of the players in the NFL are African American.
Yeah.
And people say, well, why does that make a difference? Well, that's the reason that white people turn in to watch the NFL.
Yeah.
Because it's 70%, 75% African American.
Yep.
They don't tune in to watch the white guys. Yes, there's a handful of white quarterbacks that make an impact. But tell me, which was the last white running back other than Christian McCaffrey that anybody paid attention to in the NFL? I mean, there's a couple white receivers that go out and get grabs periodically, but 90% of the receivers in the NFL are African Americans that are making impacts every game that make the difference. One white running back, went over the 1,000-yard threshold this year. When was the last time that happened? Other than Christian McCaffrey. So as you look at the league, and we talk about the top pass rushers in the league, African American, the top defensive backs in the league, African American. So if you have these guys in these critical positions, you talked about 4 African American quarterbacks left in the playoff. 50% of the playoff quarterbacks today in the NFL are African Americans. Decades ago, Charlton, they weren't prescient enough to take a snap behind the center. People said they weren't intelligent enough. Now they're leading 4 of the 8 last franchise playing in the NFL in the playoffs. You have black middle linebackers in the NFL, the guys who are making the signal calls, as well as free safety. And you're saying that these people are not intelligent enough to make the call. Look at the teams that are still playing. You have African-American offensive coordinators. You have African-American defensive coordinators. And yet they can't get an interview by the white owners in the job openings that exist. 2 African-American coaches, Charlton, that were fired a couple years ago had winning records. Jim Caldwell at Detroit.
Can't get a job.
In 3 years, he had one losing season. He loses his job with a 9-7 season in his last year. Marvin Lewis makes the playoffs 7 times. 7 times. There are white coaches still today in the NFL that have never made the playoffs. But yet, the next white guy up that comes up, that's the next flavor of the month, that's supposed to be this next genius that's going to go out there and boss around all of these African-American players, and that head coach has no experience. The guy that Giants just hired, the wide receiver coach
from New England
for the New England Patriots, he's a better offensive mind than Eric Bieniemy. He's a better offensive mind than Leslie Frazier, who's been one of the top defensive coordinators in the NFL for the last decade. We see what Eric Bieniemy has done with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. And yet these guys can't get an interview, can't get a call. You never hear in the coaching search, oh, this guy is on the top of the list. Oh, but the guys on the top of the list are all white, and the news outlets have no problem announcing their name.
They really don't. And I know growing up, too, because I don't want to be disingenuous to people that I'm responsible for, Big C, and telling them but I really believe I can do anything. But I'm going to say also, for other black men out there, I was talking to a guy today that does a lot of work around the Golden State Warriors. He also does some interviews with the 49ers, and we're going to be talking some more later this year, Big C. And he's an African-American man, and he did an interview. He did, not even name dropping, he did an interview with Steph Curry and some other prominent African-American people that are in sports in the Bay Area. And there's so much more behind the scenes than just when they have tip-off, Big C. But I was asking him some things about how he got his foot in the door, because I met him at the Super Bowl back in, I think it was Super Bowl 50, went down in Santa Clara. And he said the same thing to me that a lot of other men have said too. And at some point in time, we need decent white men, because I don't want to indict every white man. There's been a lot of white men that have opened doors too. But white guys, and the challenge for them, when I finally heard some of it on the radio this morning in the Bay Area, some of them are finally, after years, talking about how they got to help end racism. Where have you ever heard that before? We've been saying that's the solution in a long time, Big C. Your thoughts?
Nepotism has always existed, Charlton. I remember when I first got my first analyst job. I was the first black to have gotten that job.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's like, even, one of the first production meetings we had a guy who was a sideline guy who was always telling racist jokes.
Yeah.
And with me in the room, all of a sudden, he made the joke. Instead of being, and I'm going to be racist on this, instead of being a wetback, he was saying a Mexican.
Yeah.
Instead of being a chink, he was saying a Chinese guy.
Yeah.
Instead of saying a Negro, he was saying an African American.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute, hold it. Why can't that African American be white?
Yep.
Why can't he be a redneck? Whatever. And I'm not being racist. I'm just saying the tone of what Americans speak, Charlton.
Yeah.
And so he turned as red as a stop sign at that point, and everybody else in the meeting, because I was the only black guy in there.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll tell you this. If this is going to continue with the rhetoric in this room, I don't know if I'll keep this job, because I'm going to knock your ass out. And I told him that.
Yeah.
I will do that, because it means that much to me about my integrity as a culture and everybody else, is that we should not be denigrated, because this has been the modus operandi of you guys forever. Now that you got a black person in the room, you got to change how you use your racial rhetoric. No, don't use it at all.
Yeah,
and that's what we have now. When we look at, we cannot get black men interviewed for jobs in the NFL that are qualified. You're telling me that a guy in college who has never coached professional athletes is more qualified than a guy who has a track record of coaching African-American athletes on the professional level, having those type of relationships, mentally understanding the operation of these individuals and how it works at that level, that they're not qualified, that you can bring some yahoo out of college who's had minimal success, who's never won a championship,
not even
at
one
any
championship
level in college.
Yeah.
But no, he's better than the guys in the NFL that have been on championship caliber teams.
Yeah, and we all know the real thing is, and what we're doing, I'm seeing more and more people trying to do it, but they'll bring in a third party so they can say if these are not our words. But it's just real talk. Nobody's getting any younger. At some point in time, we want to leave the world a better place. That's what Dr. King talked about, I Have a Dream. But it wasn't about being colorblind society. You don't have to walk into a flower or a rose garden and say, I'm colorblind, I'm just going to pick up any flower because they all look the same. No, they don't look the same. That's why God made a difference. That's why there's a potpourri of flowers, Big C. But I do believe in science, and I just want to be a part of that, the research that if people really want to know how to end this racism and quit hiding and saying, well, they just got to, we need more time. People aren't ready yet. Know the origin of all human
Charlton,
beings.
Who asked the questions, Arthur? It's the white guy asked the question. I mean, if you watch any sports broadcast show, all of the white guys are asking the questions, well, why isn't this guy getting an interview? You know damn well why the guy is not getting an interview. You want to ask the black guy across the table from you. You want to put him on the spot instead of putting yourself on the spot. All you have to do is say what you know internally within the company that you're with. You can look at any of the sports shows that came on this morning, regardless of the network. They were all making the same statements. They were all kowtowing down to the racism that's there. They know it is, Charlton. They just don't want to call it out, but be obvious about it. You know that the black guys are not getting an interview. You're going to say, well, why isn't this? You know why it is. Don't sit there and play that naivety thinking that the listening audience is dumb. Don't do that. We have to stop that at this point. We're in 2020, Charlton. And we still got white guys and white women on television telling us as well, we don't understand. You know damn well how you got your job. You understand exactly what's going on. And don't sit there and use that rhetoric to the listening audience, whether it's television or radio, saying, how does this affect that or how does this affect that? It's the same way that you got your butt sitting behind the camera, sitting up there talking to the nation. That's the same way that the white guy got the interview and got the coaching job because of your complexion.
Yeah, I've always thought, being out here in California, being close to Hollywood, there's this thing called being blackballed in Hollywood, and a lot of actors and actresses have gone through that too. And then it's kind of, brushed under the carpet now. We had the Black Panther set records as a movie, and then it opened some doors. We'll see how long it lasts. But I'll never forget this Me Too movement that we had. And of all people, they used Oprah Winfrey to give a resounding speech. It was a speech that was so electrifying that people gave her a standing ovation, that they would use a black woman to talk about how to make equality in the workforce for women in Hollywood, where it's all white, like 90% Caucasian. But they let Oprah give a grandstanding speech to say, hey, everything's better now because Oprah spoke. When Oprah finished speaking, it still went back to being Lily White, Big C. It's opened the door slightly. But they should have white women. Meryl Streep should make those comments, Big C. It should be people like her making those comments. And Streisand, those are the people that have to make a difference. And I want to say, as Big C Sports, I just appreciate that we can have that conversation. And we're just looking for decent white men who are honest. The guys that are knuckleheads couldn't care less. But I think conversation makes it happen. I want to get one more thought on that before we close out, Big C. At the end of the day, I do believe that if we have this thing where it's Warren Buffett and Jay-Z and how Jay-Z's brought into the NFL with Goodell, and I really don't know what it's for. You don't hear about him. At the same time, it takes people at the top to open doors for anybody. But sometimes if we don't tell people that we want that door open, they'll let your butt stay outside. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you see Jay-Z's input in the NFL and the commercials that you see on television, as far as the music that they utilize, Charlton, and you see how these teams are coming up, the fans are bantering against each other in commercials. That's Jay-Z's input in the NFL, as well as also the entertainment for the Super Bowl and things of that nature. That's Jay-Z's
okay, well, let me...
He's not in a total managerial aspect. The NFL is partnered up with thousands of people, hundreds of people, Charlton, that we don't understand. We just know that Jay-Z's name was out there, and people misconstrued the reason why Jay-Z was in partnership with the NFL and management of the NFL.
Yeah.
It's a business venture, Charlton. It's not about getting players here or getting players there. That's solely up to the league and the teams. Just like with the debacle with the Colin Kaepernick thing. The league was trying to save face. Okay, we're going to let everybody look at Colin Kaepernick. The league would be better served to just say Colin Kaepernick was blackballed.
Yeah.
Not say that nobody's talking about it. Be honest. Just like you don't hire African Americans as head coaches in the NFL, say you blackballed a black quarterback for protesting against injustice in America.
Yeah.
It was not the place, because as you look at these owners have to be advocates for injustice in America, because they prove it every time there's a coaching hire in Charlton that they don't hire black coaches.
Yeah.
Point blank. So you have to be against what Colin Kaepernick was protesting for. If you were to hire black coaches, then you would say you were in tune with what Colin Kaepernick was doing when he protested anti-justice in America.
Yeah.
These owners perpetuate anti-justice as far as hiring every year.
Yeah, I think at least give people the chance to interview. Nobody's saying guarantee anyone a job. You just got to at least give opportunity for the interview. We need a man to do. Maybe they should bring in Oprah to say how great the hiring opportunities are in the NFL. She did it for Hollywood, and people gave her a standing ovation. They should have had a white woman do it, because they even talk garbage about Oprah when she's not in the room. And we all know that's true. I just believe in having conversation, dialogue. You can't please everybody. Don't even try. But no one can say we're not telling the truth. You don't have to like it, but you can't say we're not telling the truth. It's only white Americans that can change the racism that happens in this country. And it's only men that can really change the sexism. That's my belief, and I'll stand by that, Big C. I want to get in as far as beliefs also. People talk about the best rivalries in a decade. And one of the biggest rivalries out there It's black versus white. It really has been that way since the Emancipation Proclamation. I want to tie that into some sports teams because there was a time when people couldn't do what Big C Sports is doing, especially as a black male getting a job. We talk about how hard it is to get a job because the white men want you to smile all the time. You can't even talk because your face got to smile the whole time, but a guy can be like Donald Trump and they'll keep him on the air. So this is my point. The only way things change is when people actually break bread, even if you want to say pray together, but it gotta be honesty, Big C. Without honesty, it will never change. Does that make any sense, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, no one demonstrates honesty on television, Charlton. When you listen to these talk shows, you listen to the news outlets, you got to call what it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's the same as when they talk about the president, and the president tells a flat-out lie on television. They'll say, well, it's inaccurate. Damn, a lie is a lie. You were told that as a kid.
Yeah.
Don't lie.
Yeah.
If you tell a lie, it is what it is. It's not a misstatement.
Yeah.
It's not that, Charlton. It's not misspoken. And this man say he's one of the most intelligent men in the world.
Well,
And so when he tells a lie and the media doesn't call it out as a lie, then it's what it is, Charlton. And it fuels things in America. It fuels the rest of society to act the way it is. If you let him get away with lies, then everybody else will. It's just like in the hiring process of the teams. The Cleveland Browns are still a team without a head coach.
yeah.
One opening in the NFL. They had a black head coach 2 years ago. They fired him for a guy who had the same record that he had.
Isn't that
Think
amazing?
about that.
Yeah.
And in 1 year, they get rid of the white guy. Who are they going to hire, Charlton? They're not going to interview a black coach. They're not going to bring one in. Cleveland, one of the Midwest cities, Charlton, that has a huge African-American population.
Yeah.
And they're saying that we can have failure after failure with white coaches. We brought in one black coach, Charlton. He didn't get it done. We're not going to hire anymore. We're going to go back to the same thing that we're used to. We're going to bring in another white coach, keep him 3 years, and be gone again.
Yeah.
Why can't you do that for another African-American coach? Bring him in for 3 to 4 years.
I think people just got to be told. And it's, again, decent people will always listen. If you're not decent, doesn't matter what color you are. That's what we call on decent people, to just be fair. That's all we're asking for. So going back to the best rivalries of all time, and I want to go to this decade even, Big C. You look at Alabama and Clemson. There was a time Alabama was a segregated program, Big C. The great Paul Bear Bryant has a statue, but he helped change that segregation. And just like we're asking the NFL ownership, you don't have to be segregated in your hiring policies. Look at how great Alabama is now. I'm talking to every white coach out there or every white owner who thinks, oh, enough of this race stuff. No, listen to this. Look at how great this Alabama program has become since integration. They were not winning the way they're winning now when they were a segregated school. You know why? Because they sought the best to help build that program. And if you look at their kids top to bottom, about 70% of them are African American. And the coaches and the owners of NFL teams, they'll benefit the same too, Big C. That make any sense? Your thoughts?
Well, even though Bear Bryant integrated Alabama, Bear Bryant still would not play a black quarterback. There was a black quarterback in the South out of Huntsville, Alabama. His name was Condris Holloway.
Yeah.
Who was the top quarterback in the South when he was coming out of high school. He could have went and played pro baseball at the time. Bear Bryant recruited him, wanted him at Alabama. He was out of Huntsville, Alabama. Told him that he could not play quarterback, though. Even though he was the top high school quarterback in the state, told him he would have to play defensive back or wide receiver if he came to Alabama because he wasn't ready to play a black quarterback. Even though he dealt with segregation, Charlton,
Yeah.
he was still racist at certain positions.
That is very true. And I'm asking all of our brethren, just have that real come to Jesus moment. At least be honest. I've been told the truth shall set you free, and we want to help people get free by having that dialogue. Also, before we get into the Big C timeout, Big C, you look at the Alabama Clemson, you look at the Golden State Warriors versus the Cleveland Cavaliers, the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox. You look at Duke versus North Carolina, and then Alabama Auburn. When you think about rivalries over the last decade, I think those are all up there at the top. But one thing they all have in common, every single one of them have in common, they have equal opportunity for their athletes. Maybe not for coaching yet, but it's going to start by people asking decent people, not the knuckleheads. That make any sense, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at all those rivalries that you talked about, Charlton, all of those rivalries produce championships.
Yeah.
When you think about the Alabama Clemson, Charlton, those guys met 4 times in the decade in playing, and it all led to a national championship between those 2 teams meeting, Charlton, over those 4 terms. You think about the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors produced multiple championships out of that series. Golden State had the better hand, but Cleveland came back with a record run when they were down 3-1 to upset the Warriors and win a championship. We know the heated rivalry of the Yankees and the Red Sox over the decade, Charlton, the greatest rivalry in baseball.
Yeah.
2 cities that genuinely hate each other with the greatest fan bases in all of baseball. You talk about knowledgeable people when you go to the ballpark.
Yeah.
You don't need a broadcaster when you go to a Yankees-Red Sox game, Charlton, because everybody in the stands
they know their stuff.
Can explain to you. When you talk about the Iron Bowl between Auburn and Alabama, been some of the most exciting, electrifying moments of the decade in that series, Charlton. When you think about Auburn, Alabama, you can hold on to your seat, Charlton, because you never know what's going to happen in that series.
Yeah, you never know. And so I love how sports can bring our society together. Just like any relationship, you're never always going to see eye to eye. But having conversation is a lot better in the end. You can follow Big C Sports Timeout. We're going to take the Big C Timeout, also known as the Big C Pause. We'll come right back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C Timeout, also known as the Big C Pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com, the apps that I really love, and do it. Say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast, and you will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he will do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. You just got to download the app. And even when it comes to race in sports, remember, it's not always easy, but if you're honest, then it gets easier. Best sports team of the decade, Alabama Crimson Tide, Golden State Warriors, New England Patriots, Boston Red Sox, and the UConn women. You know what they all have in common? They're integrated, Big C, just like coaching should be, and they've all won championships, Big C. Your thoughts?
All of those teams, Charlton, dominated the last decade in sports. You think about the Alabama Crimson Tide. This is a team that now today, Charlton, can play with minority quarterbacks. If you think about the last 2 quarterbacks at the University of Alabama, Charlton, they've been minorities.
Yeah. You've
had an Hawaiian and you've had an African-American that have propelled that team onto the national stage. Nick Saban has no problem doing that, where Bear Bryant could have done that 40 years ago.
Yeah.
You look at the Golden State Warriors, Charlton, you have a plethora of stars from around the world. You think about an integrated international team. They had players from multiple countries on that team, Charlton, and they were all brought together in one mesh of harmony to be consistent in the NBA. You look at the NBA now, Charlton. The NBA is not what it was 3 years ago when the anticipation of the Golden State Warriors were on television.
Yeah.
Because you wanted to sit up and watch these African-Americans run up and down the floor and dominate a league. Everybody in America looked forward to it. That excitement doesn't exist today. We talk about the New England Patriots. People love or hate the Patriots for their dominance.
Yeah.
But as you look at where this Patriots organization was, Bill Belichick had no problems, he and Robert Kraft, hiring African-American assistant coaches, Charlton, as coordinators on defense.
Yeah.
They had it. A couple of them have gone off and got head coaching jobs. Romeo Kamel and Brian Flores went on to become NFL head coaches from that coaching tree, Charlton, in New England, and they've been the most exciting team in the NFL. You got to realize they brought more attention to the NFL in the last decade than any other franchise because of their winning and other antics that they've done. So as we look at these great teams in sports, Charlton, and what they've meant, that's the reason why.
And for every owner out there, notice the New England Patriots, they're a very integrated team. I know they haven't had an African-American head coach yet, but under Belichick, they've had some assistants that have gone on to get head coaching positions. That's what I respect about Bob Kraft. Irrespective of everybody's personal life, there are no perfect people, period. So I really appreciate that. And for every every sports team, every ownership team, what do you not like about the New England Patriots winning so much? They're a very integrated program, Big C. When I think about the best sports towns in this decade, you think about Boston. It's hard to argue that Boston, I mean, they win everything, Big C. Chicago's a great city also for sports. The San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose Bay Area, very good city for sports, a lot of championships there. Washington, D.C., they've climbed on that map of winning championships also, Big C, with their baseball and we know their football. And then Los Angeles, which is, I think, still the mecca in sports because you have Hollywood that's also part of sports now and everybody wants to be a part of that. But one thing that all of these things, these teams have in common, it wasn't always this way, but they all become very integrated. They've learned to win through integration. And you would think ownership would learn the same thing, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at Boston, what makes it the greatest sports city in America, Charlton, is that all its major sports have won championships during the decade. Yeah, the Boston Bruins have won championships. The Boston Red Sox, the New England Patriots, Charlton, have all won professional championships. The only one that did not get on that train, Charlton, were the Boston Celtics, but they came close. They've won them in the past. You look at the Bay Area. You think about the dominance of the Golden State Warriors and the San Francisco Giants during the decades. Both of those teams, Charlton, winning 3 championships. That's hard to say of teams in your professional area that you've won 3 championships.
Yeah.
You think about Los Angeles coming back, being one of the great sports cities. Los Angeles was a city that was able to acquire 2 sports teams. When you think about it, they brought the Rams back in play, Charlton. They brought the Chargers back into that city.
Yeah.
No other team can testify to that. And you have 2 great baseball teams in the Angels and the Dodgers, and the Lakers right now on the top of the Western Conference.
Yeah, they really are, and they're all very integrated. This is for ownership, too. You know, if we realized it was integration that helped programs become great, not segregation. The biggest sports win of the decade, think about this. You have the Cubs. I mean, everybody had to love the Cubs winning the World Series this decade. Toronto Raptors, defending NBA champion. Toronto Raptors, what they did for a whole country in Canada to win championships. The St. Louis Blues, who doesn't want the arch? They got guys pouring beer off the arch, Big Z. Lord Stanley's Cup, Cleveland Cavaliers. Cleveland, this one's for you. The great LeBron James said that, with an NBA title. And then the Philadelphia Eagles, they won a Super Bowl. In the city of brotherly love, they still boo their players, Big C. But one thing they all have in common, Big C, it wasn't always this way. They all have integrated sports teams. That means they get the best of everybody to help win a championship. And the owners should do the same thing when it comes to hiring coaches, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when we look at the biggest sports wins of the decade, Charlton, you think about the lovable Cubs. 108 years between World Series championships. This is a win for the ages, for a city, for a culture, for generations of Cubs fans, Charlton, who never got an opportunity to see the Cubs host that World Series championship. The Toronto Raptors only took them 24 years to become the NBA champions, Charlton.
Yep.
The expansion team, the only team outside the U.S. to win an NBA title, and the Toronto Raptors have done it.
Yep.
You think about the St. Louis Blues winning the Stanley Cup. Took them 40 years, Charlton. This is a team in their first 3 seasons in the NHL made trips to the Stanley Cup Finals. Came up empty. Took them 40 years to get back, Charlton. They had the longest odds on favor to win, and they won it.
Yep.
We talk about another city in futility, the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was the first title in Cleveland in 52 years when LeBron James helped the Cleveland Cavaliers upset the Golden State Warriors.
Yep.
And don't leave out the Philadelphia Eagles. Had made trips to the Super Bowl on 2 previous occasions, Charlton. They had lost both of those trips in the Super Bowl to the Raiders and the New England Patriots. But the third time was a charm against the New England Patriots, led by Nick Foles. They hoisted the Vince Lombardi Trophy.
They sure did, Big C. And these guys did it through integration and inclusion, not because they felt sorry for people, but because they just wanted the best opportunities, the top 5 best moments in the sports in a decade. Auburn beat Alabama on the kick 6, the kick return that scored a touchdown in the last moments of that game. Cleveland Cavaliers, you talked about them, their first sports title in 52 years. Big C. Villanova won in 2016 the NCAA title on a buzzer beater. And the Cubs won the first World Series, as you mentioned, 108 years. But then we talk about segregation, which still exists in Augusta, Georgia. But it was Tiger Woods. I know he says he's Cobbler Nation, but he's paying homage to his parents both of his parents, Big C. He's still African American, according to Dr. Leakey Gregory Mendham. But Tiger Woods, as an African American man, he moved the needle more than anyone in the history of the universe at Augusta, Georgia, for anyone that loves golfing. Even if let's say you're a bigot and you're a closet bigot because you won't come out and say that you are, you'll say, hey, I believe everybody's fair. Tiger Woods makes more money for white corporations when he's golfing good and has a chance to win on Sunday. The needle moves because he's excellent, and he happens to be African American. Big C, segregation has always hurt people. Integration has always helped. If owners can see the same thing that integration has done on the sports field, just make your hiring process equal. It doesn't mean you're going to hire someone who's not white, but you may just find someone who's an opportunity to make you more money if that makes more sense. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it could be there, but they don't look at that. They have more money, Charlton, than they can worry about. The thing that they look at is just like with Jerry Jones when he had Mike McCarthy stay over at his house.
Yeah.
When you're sitting at the dinner table, Charlton, you want to be able to talk freely and not sit there and worry about what you say that might offend somebody.
Yeah.
Mike McCarthy was able to sit down with Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones felt comfortable with having him in the house because he looked like everybody except for the housekeeper, which I'm going to expect they were Hispanic in his house, Jerry Jones. But Mike McCarthy could pass for a family member, walking around in his pajamas or his house coat, whatever, Charlton.
Yeah.
So when we think about giving opportunity segue is great in life, Charlton, yes. And people will always say, well, there's more African-American millionaires now than there ever was. Well, there's more people in the world now than there ever was.
Yeah.
There are more jobs available with paying millionaire salaries, mainly in sports, Charlton, but we don't get that segue in mainstream society where African-Americans still struggle for equality. And when you struggle for equality in society, you struggle for equality in managerial positions. Being a head coach in professional sports or in college sports is a managerial position.
Yeah.
You have to get promoted to it. You just don't grow into it. You're promoted into that position, Charlton. We don't have opportunity for promotion as much as people want to say, whether it's in mainstream, whether it's in sports. It comes down to promotion.
Yep.
And people say, well, it's about knowing somebody. Yes, nepotism is knowing somebody also.
Yep.
Knowing somebody who looks like you, who talks like you, who could pass for you.
Yeah.
This is the reason why we don't get the opportunities in mainstream society, nor do we get them in sports society, because we don't look like the people making the decisions as African Americans.
And we're gonna call for the decent people to add inclusion, just like this greatest. You think about this: we're doing the best of the decade, the best pro teams of the decade, the U.S. Women's National Soccer Team, the San Francisco Giants, Chicago Blackhawks, Golden State Warriors, New England Patriots. They all have this integration as part of why they're so successful. We want to bring the same things to the coaching level, and I think we're going to do it by talking about it. But those are some good teams on the national level. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when we think about the best pro teams of the decade, you think about the U.S. women's soccer team, Charlton, winning 2 world titles during the decade. And not only that, their second world title where they were fighting for equality. We talk about equality for African Americans. Even women have to fight for equality to get equal pay for a women's team where the men's team has done nothing in the last decade. They won 2 world titles and can't get paid properly.
And
you look at the San Francisco Giants, Charlton. This is a team that won 3 World Series during that decade. No other team won as many as Bruce Bochy and the San Francisco Giants during that decade. The Chicago Blackhawks also won 3 Stanley Cups during the decade. They were a dominant force. When you think about a city of intelligent sports fans, Chicago has a bevy of them.
Amazing.
Only the Bulls did not produce when you think about Chicago and the White Sox, but the Blackhawks have been a staple there. The Golden State Warriors, we know of that 5-year span that they had in the NBA, which was good as any 5-year span that we've seen with any team.
Yeah.
So when you talk about what the Bay Area fans were able to enjoy between the San Francisco Giants and the Golden State Warriors, Charlton, what a great place to be in. Just like with the New England Patriots back in the Boston area, Charlton, the most dominant team in the NFL during the decade.
Yeah, it has been, and it's amazing that you have so much to do in the world of sports. And as I'm talking about how we can become the vanguards for creating opportunity, it all starts with dialogue. In Big C Sports, I think our program, as much as any, will have the dialogue, and we ask everybody. It's not about blaming somebody. Just point out the facts, and the facts fall where they fall. Best college teams of the decade: the UConn Huskies women basketball team, the Clemson Tigers, Alabama Crimson Tide, Duke Blue Devils, Vanderbilt Commodores baseball. It's amazing. Wasn't always the same, just like in coaching ranks. Not all these teams were integrated back in the day. But since integration, every one of these great franchises have gone on to win big. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think about the Commodores basketball team, and not often do you hear about Vanderbilt University. But this was a team that won 2 baseball NCAA titles during the decade, Charlton. They won the last of the decade. So when you think about great baseball players, and they were led by a freshman pitcher who was an African-American rocker. His dad played at Auburn and also played in the NFL.
Yeah.
But he was the most dominant pitcher during the College World Series.
Yeah.
We think about the UConn women's basketball team. What can you say about Gino Auriemma and the Lady UConn Huskies, Charlton?
Yeah.
The most dominant program we've ever seen in women's college basketball. We look at the Crimson Tigers. They've been in the national championship playoffs the last 4 years, Charlton, winning 2 out of the last 3, and they're entering the new decade with an opportunity to win back-to-back championships. Alabama Crimson Tide, they are who they are. Been the most dominant program of the decade in college football. When you come down to Duke Blue Devils and the North Carolina Tar Heels, Charlton, these teams play each other every year.
Yeah.
And they play each other twice a year during the conference season. And when you look down at the end of the day, Charlton, you're talking about 2 teams that are equal, regardless of the record. These schools are separated by 18 miles and a lot of hostility.
A lot of hostility, Big C, and they're all played. They have integrated programs, and that's one of the reasons they're succeeding. I hope the NFL owners will start doing the same thing. Just give everybody the opportunity. If you really want to win, you can't find the best when you interview more people. The best players of the decade, Big C: Serena Williams, Steph Curry, Mike Trout, Tom Brady, LeBron James. Every single one of these athletes, they all deal with a society in sports that has been very inclusive, not always at the ownership level or at the head coaching level. But if every ownership can look at the makeup of their team and realize why you're winning championships, Big C, it's all because of integration. If tennis refused to integrate players, we wouldn't hear about the great Serena Williams and all of her titles. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, as we look at the greatest pro sports athletes of the decade, Charlton, you bring up Serena Williams right off the top, the most dominant women's tennis player in the history of the sport.
Yep.
She's had a couple of bad tournaments in the last year, Charlton, but when you look at what she did over the decade, she was must-see television when she was on the court. We always talk about Tom Brady, more Super Bowl titles than any quarterback in NFL history.
Yeah.
And 2 MVPs during that decade, Charlton. Love or hate, Tom Brady has been great. Steph Curry, the only player in NBA history to be unanimous MVP, and he won MVPs in back-to-back seasons.
Yep.
Also led a team that set an NBA record for victories with 73. What can you say about the great LeBron James? There's not enough superlatives that you can say about LeBron James, Charlton. He has done and did it all in the NBA, and it still continues to this day at the age of 35. Mike Trout, the greatest baseball player during the decade. There's nothing that Mike Trout had not accomplished. 3 MVPs during the decade, Charlton. The only thing he hasn't gotten to is a World Series. And I hope in the next decade we get an opportunity to see him in one.
Well, there's just so much. And again, with those same players, they go to work in an integrated society. Imagine an African-American head coach can sit around with his brethren and see more than 2 or 3 guys that look like him when 75% of the players do. Imagine if golf, the great Masters coming up in Augusta, Georgia. Imagine if on all the 18 holes, they only had 2 white commentators and the rest were African-American or Hispanic. Golf is predominantly Caucasian. From the beginning to getting into becoming a pro, a lot of this, it's just challenging for a lot of people to get in there. But the broadcasters look like the majority of the athletes. We're not saying that all the broadcasters and all the coaches should be African American. We're just asking for everyone to line up at the starting line to have the interview. That's all we're asking. Big C, we know that sports is $1 billion industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to that industry. I want to pay homage to our high school athletes. The top high school athlete of the decade, and it's our opinion, you can Google it, in football, Kyler Murray out of Allen, Texas, and now the Arizona Cardinals by way of Oklahoma. In boys basketball, Karl Anthony Towns out of St. Joseph, Mention, New Jersey, Minnesota Timberwolves now. Girls basketball, Breanna Stewart, Cicero North Syracuse in Syracuse, New York, now with the Seattle Storm. In baseball, you look at Francisco Lindor, Montverde Bay Academy out of Montverde, Florida, now with the Cleveland Indians. And then boys ice hockey, you have Casey Middlestat out of Eden Prairie, Minnesota, now with the Buffalo Sabres. We even pay homage to the high school level. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is always where it's done. You always pay homage to Friday Night Lights of the great football teams on the high school football level, Charlton. And doing this, Charlton, to show where these young men started at and young ladies, where they started in high school, to let people know that sports is important on every level. And you talked about Kyler Murray, who started in Allen, Texas, ended up with the Arizona Cardinals, started at Texas A&M, went to Oklahoma, ended up as the number one draft pick. He was a number one draft pick in baseball. He was a number one draft pick in the NFL. Karl Anthony Towns, we know what he has meant to the Minnesota Timberwolves, Charlton. Spent 1 year at the University of Kentucky, first overall pick in the NFL draft, in the NBA draft. You think about the common theme with all these players, Charlton. They ended up becoming the number one draft pick overall in their sports. Breanna Stewart. And we talked about Gino Auriemma and the UConn Lady Huskies. She was the best player on that team, Charlton, during her 4 years at UConn. So when we think about Francisco Lindor, one of the best second basemen, a three-time All-Star with the Cleveland Indians, has been a phenomenal player in Major League Baseball. And so as it grows, and you talk about Casey Middlestat, Eden Prairie. Who would have known what Eden Prairie was in Minnesota? I'm thinking that's someplace up in Canada. But, the Buffalo Sabres saw enough in this young man. And this started in high school, Charlton. That's where you learn the basics of the game. Don't look at a highlight show on television thinking that that's how I'm going to be. Listen to your high school coaches. Learn the work ethic. Learn the respect. And this is where you can end up, being a professional in your chosen sport.
You can end up there. Best coaches in the last 10 minutes. Best coaches of the decade, pro sports. Bill Belichick. I want to call him Bill Jedi Knight Belichick, according to Star Wars, the great Star Wars hero, Big C. New England Patriots, of course. Steve Kerr, Golden State Warriors. The great Bruce Bochy, San Francisco Giants. And Joel Quenneville, Chicago, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at Quenneville, you look at Bochy, you look at Kerr, you look at Belichick, Charlton. You talk about four great coaches. You know what they all have in common during the decade, Charlton?
What's that?
All four of them had 3 titles. Think about that.
Wow.
You can name the 4 best professional coaches of the decade, and they all hoisted the championship trophy in their chosen sports. In the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and the NHL. That's greatness on one big table, Charlton.
It's amazing how these sports are so integrated. And as Tevin, think about this. We talk about why we need the Rooney Rule. We just need the common sense rule. If you want to make more money, you got to integrate your programs. All the colleges and the high schools have done it because it helps them win. And when you win, you make money. If you're an owner, why not have the best talent pool come together? And you can pick and choose who you want to run your program. It's never failed, Big C. Never in the history has integration failed when you have good people. There's always some bad apples, too. Top high school coaches of the decade, Jason Negro, St. John Bosco, Bellflower, California, this year's high school football national champions. Boys basketball, there's Kevin Boyle out of Montverde Academy in Montverde, Florida, 2000. He actually has 207 wins, only 19 losses. Girls basketball, Joe Lombard, Canyon High School of Texas, won 5 state championships. Boys baseball, there's Chan Brown. Parkview Lilburn out of Georgia, won 5 state championships. And then boys ice hockey. You have so many great things that have gone on to help people win, but a lot of people have done it with integration. You have Bill Belial out of Mount State Charles Academy, Woonsocket, Rhode Island. It's even hard to say those names. He retired at the conclusion of the 2019 season as the all-time winningest hockey coach in the National Hockey League, over 1,000 wins, including 4 titles during the decade, and 32 in total. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you think about these mentors, and that's what high school coaches are, Charlton, they're mentors to the young athletes that are growing up. And to have that many championships, as you speak about, you think about Kyle Boyle, 207 wins and only 19 losses during the decade. This is a coach who is teaching work ethic. Joe Lombardi, the girls' basketball coach in Canyon, Texas, 5 state championships. And when we think about the state of Texas and all the great athletes in that state, Charlton, you know, what a great accomplishment. But I like Bill Bissell, the hockey coach, Charlton. You think about, you said he retired at the end of the season with over 1,000 victories on the high school level, a total of 32 national championships. You think about the time and effort you have to bring in with that many young men over that time to accomplish 32 national championships, and 4 of them were done in the last decade. What a great mentor and an inspiration to young men who came through his program.
There's so much that we could touch on. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Speaker.com. The apps that I really love are by Google and Alexa. And just try it. Say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he will do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. I want to run down in the final few moments tonight's Big C's NBA basketball schedule. Washington Wizards at the Orlando Magic, San Antonio Spurs at the Boston Celtics, the Miami Heat at the Indiana Pacers, the defending world champions, Toronto Raptors at the Charlotte Hornets, the Denver Nuggets at the Dallas Mavericks in a big game down south, Big C, Houston Rockets at the Atlanta Hawks, Chicago Bulls versus the Pelicans, the Knicks are at the Jazz, the Bucks are at the Warriors. There's a lot going on in the sports universe. And Big C, I really hope that all people, like we all have a dream, that our children will live a better life than we live. And we all want to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. There's nothing wrong with that. I've yet to find a parent that did not want their children to stand on their shoulders so they can see further, Big C. But as people of color, don't be afraid to say what you see. And for white Americans too, it's okay to say what you see. We don't all have to agree. But no one can tell me that the world is better when women can't work. No one can tell me that the world is better when women cannot learn a living wage compared to men. No one can tell me that the world is better when men and people of color cannot even get an interview for a job that we fought hard for people to get. The civil rights movement, it was started by black Americans and some Jewish Americans with an NAACP, of course. But since those doors opened, mostly white women have advanced off the blood of black people. And people say our thoughts and prayers. Well, let's have thoughts and prayers for making sure we have the dialogue that creates greatness in our society. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the one thing that I'm getting tired of, Charlton, I've dealt with it my entire life, the decades. Why is it that minorities have to address the problems of society? Why can't society just acknowledge its wrongs? So as we talk about racism, or anybody else wants to talk about racism or segregation, it's normally brought up by the minorities who are being oppressed in various situations. White people should be the ones who acknowledge it. And as I said, as I listen to other sports shows periodically, they will say, what's the reason? Well, hell, all you're doing is looking at each other, and you know what the reason is. The same reason why you can look at a sports show, and the main people on the sports show, the host of the sports show is white. Yes, they'll have some guests and some analysts that come in. They're minority. But the show is hosted by a white guy. Is he the only one who can read the teleprompter? Is he the only one that can give you the information? Because he's calling on the black guests to answer the questions. You don't think he can ask a white guy a question? So why is it the table flipped? Until the table gets flipped, where you put the white guy on television on the spot and tell us why the black guys are not getting hired or interviewed. And he's going to sit there, well, I don't know the answer to that question. He knows the answer to the question, Charlton.
Yeah.
So stop asking minorities to explain why things don't exist. Just like we're trying to explain why things are not happening, Charlton. We should not have to. We're not a part of the solution. We're not a part of the problem. The problem and the solution lays with those in power.
Yeah.
So until they decide that they want equality, it's not about people trying to achieve it and obtain it. Equality is something that's given. It's not earned. And I don't know why people keep using that mantra that it's earned. It's not. You have to give equality in this country.
Yeah.
Look how long minorities have fought for equality. Haven't gotten it, Charlton, on any level. Yes, there have been peaks of people being able to get into certain segments of society, but it's not been given freely to everybody. Minorities are still being oppressed on every level in America. Not just sports. Sports is the last part that I worry about minorities getting equal opportunity in. I worry about minorities getting equal opportunity in life.
Yeah.
Sports is just something that's a pastime. Life is something that's full-time.
Well, you're very well said. From criminal justice to sports and business, it's all got to be talked about. That's how we make it better. And I hope that we're part of that solution, Big C. Back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble, Big C. What are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, the clock is ticking on the end of the college football season, Charlton. We only got about 5 more days until that starts. But I'm worried about spring training in baseball starting before the college football season ends. The pitchers and the catchers report in less than 7 weeks.
They report in less than 7 weeks, but you can report every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to deal with that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.